Now, I'm here because my business education came across the iron sights of an M16 rifle and through the lens of a Nikon camera. As Robert mentioned, at a young age, I was commissioned by the government to study high-performing teams all over the world in some very dangerous places. And I'd like to share with you some of the things that I learned from those teams, some things that you can begin to apply right into your organizations the moment you leave here. So to start off with, it's all about waking up, isn't it? And the moment that I was woken up most rudely for the very first time, I was working for the government, and I was what you might consider a model employee, as in the kind of employee that you wouldn't want anyone to model. I had taken a nap in a corner. That's what I did at the end of my workday when I was still on the clock. And I hear a tap on my forehead, just looking up, it's my boss. 250-pound guy, biceps as big as his head. Known throughout the company because he would be in every break room doing preacher curls, looking at himself in the mirror, saying 2 words over and over. I'm hard, I'm hard. Last guy you'd ever want to meet in prison. He was the guy standing over me that day. He reaches down to hand me something. I thought for sure it was a pink slip or a counseling statement. But instead of placing either of those things in my hands, he gave me 3 live hand grenades, 90 rounds of ammunition. I cannot begin to tell you where HR failed in this situation. But it was the words that he said next that changed the rest of my life. He looked down at me and said, "Shawn, grab your gear and get in the truck. You've got 15 minutes to live." And he was serious. Now, at the time he said those words to me, I was just 21 years old. I'd barely been alive for 15 minutes. And he was asking me to wake up to change in a big way. As I looked around me, I realized I had not fallen asleep in a comfortable office. I was in a foxhole. I looked out at the skyline above me, and I didn't see skyscrapers. I saw the minarets of mosques. And on a loudspeaker, a man's voice calling the faithful to evening prayer. I was in Fallujah, Iraq in 2004, and what they would later come to call Operation Phantom Fury, the largest urban assault the military had ever conducted in that war. And we found out that we had dozens of armed insurgents headed right to our position. There were only a couple of us. We were vastly outmanned and outgunned, and we knew from our training that we could hold our line for about 15 minutes. That's why he told me I had 15 minutes to live. That's the kind of waking up that you do not want to do. But yet so many business leaders give me similar stories all the time, all around the world. They tell me, "Shawn, we were at the top of our game in our industry. Our competitors were miles behind us. I had a great team under me, and I woke up and everything had changed. The competition had caught up. My senior leaders are retiring, and I have to manage these millennials." It is not a change that happens overnight, ladies and gentlemen, even if we choose to treat it that way. And so what I'd like to do with you today is share with you some stories of how these organizations are able to create pivot points, how they're able to do things in a new way. And we're going to talk about how you can make pivoting part of your culture as well. So to roll into it, I learned that these people do things a little differently than most organizations. When most people encounter a change or a problem, the first question they ask themselves is, whose responsibility is it? Do I give this to my boss? Do I give it to one of my direct reports? Or do I deal with it myself? High-performing organizations don't do that. Instead, they ask themselves a different question. Instead of who should be handling this change, it's how should we handle this change? They look across their organizations for the people most skilled in handling that change with the most experience in that area, and they put them together in a team to make sure that change does not have any negative effects on their organization. And if that means the CEO is in a room with the janitor working something out, that's what that means. Because they know that it's not about how do we get things done so much as it is getting them done the right way, right? And so as I got out there in the field and started watching these high-performing teams all over the world across multiple industries, in Fortune 100 companies and in the military, I realized they were doing things in a way that was a lot different than organizations normally run their operations. It wasn't just about how fast can we get this done and move on to the next thing. It was taking time to treat it as a system. Every task, every project. And so whether you're making a sale or whether you're trying to keep a plane in the air, it's all the same because you're looking at how do we get better this time so that that change that stopped us last time doesn't stop us in the future. And that starts with how these organizations plan, how they create pivot points. And when I say plan, I don't mean sitting down in a room and whiteboarding something. I mean crossing the finish line before you ever step out of the gate. The first thing these high-performing teams taught me was you don't have to wait until the end of a project to cross the finish line. You don't have to wait until the end of the sale to be successful. How they do it is they clearly define what success looks like long before they ever need to figure out what do we do next. And you might be telling me, Shawn, we do that a lot in our company. Well, I go into a lot of organizations and I see employees dealing with change every single day, all day. From the moment they clock in, from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. when they leave, they're dealing with emails, voicemails, text messages, meetings, and they're all to mitigate the changes that are happening. Rarely do they take the time to sit down and think, what am I doing to move myself and my company toward the strategic goals that we have? How am I moving those big rocks down the field? And you may say, Shawn, we do that at our company. We're the exception. We tell our people about our strategy. How often do you do that? Every week? Every month? At a quarterly review or at a biannual picnic? That might not be often enough. How fast do things change in the airline industry? Every week? Every day? Every hour? If your people are chasing a goal that is out of date, if their finish line has moved on them, they will not be able to pivot. And any change that enters will destroy your plan because they're executing on an old objective. For high-performing teams, the teams that I was paid to study, they realized that intelligence is currency. It kept them alive on the battlefield. It's literally currency for you and your organizations because it's currency you can put back into your bottom line. Something like 37% of your profitability is disappearing every single year because your people are chasing outdated objectives. What you told them to do a week ago is no longer accurate because your world changes. And if you're going to have a commitment to excellence, it's about planning in a different way. Something else these teams did that I thought was very fascinating to me, they realized that their performance could only rise to the level of their training. And so as I was out there in Iraq, the very first thing they wanted me to do was step out on a combat patrol, a foot patrol in the countryside. Now I got there and realized it's a war zone out there, literally. Past that concertina and barbed wire of our base are thousands of people that want nothing more than to ruin my day. And you want me to wander out there for 6 to 12 hours in 120-degree weather with nothing but a radio? Are you crazy? They said, that's what we do every day. I said, how do you prepare your people to deal with that kind of thing? How do you deal with all of the risks that you know they're going to encounter? And they said, Shawn, we realize they'll never be able to perform better than we train them. And their training might not look the same as the training you give your people. With every single step every one of those infantrymen took on that patrol, you didn't see the hours or sometimes years of training that had gone behind it. That their leaders took time to sit down with them and spend hours, if necessary, teaching them about all the things they might encounter and what to do if the change entered their world as it does yours. What do you do if the plane is on the runway and we have to get it back in the air? What do you do if the vendor miscalculates the supplies we need or puts them in the wrong type of packaging? What do you do, from my experience as a senior leader, to pass on to that junior person, that millennial, that person that might not have ever known a world without the internet, that you think needs constant coaching, constant correction, award trophies for just showing up on time? And we all know those people. But in the teams that I was able to study and perform and fight alongside, those millennials didn't have those needs because they realized that it's not about what you tell me I did a good job. I know if I'm doing a good job or not because I'm executing on the training that you've given me. In a world where change enters 1,000 miles a minute, it's more about how do we deal with these changes coming down the line before they enter our world. So you think about all the things that you do every day to deal with change. How effective are you being? Are you struggling to get your people on the same end of the rope pulling together? It's probably because, one, the finish line might have moved on them, it might have moved on you. And two, they can only perform as well as you train them. And this goes much beyond training manuals, training programs, standards, stuff that most HR departments take on. It goes into you passing on the experience that you have as a senior leader because you've had to learn lessons the hard way. You've had to see what happens when a deal completely tanks, and you've learned not to do that again or not to do business with that company again. But your people don't know that. They haven't put in the time that you have. They haven't climbed the ladder the way that you have. And if you do not pass that information on to them, they'll make the same mistakes that you had to make. After these teams plan in that very unique way, then they have to go out there and actually perform. So on this foot patrol where we're walking outside that base, we pass by this grove of trees on our left. And I realized that I'm listening to something I've never heard before in my life, these high-pitched whines passing my face like flies going at 1,000 miles a minute. And I look around me, and the Marines on that patrol are all laying down. And they're motioning for me to get down too. Does anyone know what a high-pitched whine going by your face in that environment might be? Bullets. Someone was shooting at me. Can you believe that? The correspondent. I'm not there to fight. They were, though. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Well, those Marines laid down fire, chased the insurgents off, but then they had a problem that if this is the only lesson you bring out of this conference, it might be worth your while to be here. They realized that their culture told them, the culture they had as Marines, it told them that we will never sidestep a problem. And those trees on this heavily trafficked footpath that we took every single day had become a problem. Those insurgents had used them for cover. And for those Marines, we got lucky, but the next patrol might not be so lucky. If those insurgents use that spot again for cover, one of those Marines might not be coming home. So they had to figure out, how do we handle this problem? Because we never sidestep it. If we have the ability to provide a solution, we don't wait until the end of the quarter to get together as a management team and figure out if we should do anything about it. We solve the problem right there. That's how they're able to pivot so rapidly, so effectively. And what they did in that situation was go back to their training. In the military, they have sayings about how each branch might handle a problem differently. You see, in the Air Force, if they encounter an obstacle like a mountain, they'll go over it. The Navy might go under it. The Army will go around it. But what do you think Marines do when they encounter a mountain? They'll go through it, that's right. So I was really, really impressed and surprised when these Marines began dumping all of the tape that they had with them, duct tape, electrical tape, all the stuff they used to keep their gear silent. They started piling it up in the middle of that field. Did you know you could cut down trees with nothing but duct tape? A little duct tape and a lot of plastic explosives. They strapped 2 pounds of C4 to every one of those tree trunks, lined a common detonation to them, and with the click of a button, they turned that entire forest into an open field. Why is that important for you to understand? Because you might say, Shawn, in the military, I get it. That type of situation might cost lives. You sidestepping a change in your company, in your organization, in your team might not cost lives, but it will cost your profitability. It will cost your performance. And so as a leader, if you have the opportunity to take your experience, get it in line with your people, and say, if you encounter a challenge, I want you to tell me about it. Because if I can't help you solve it, I can at least give you my experience and how I've dealt with it. Because if you sidestep a problem, if you don't fill in something correctly, let someone else handle it. If you don't fill out an order form right, let somebody else handle it. The type of things that we sometimes have to do because we're so busy dealing with change, if we push that off to somebody else and they don't take care of it, that's what keeps a plane on the runway. That is the thing that might get your airline's title in the head of every news outlet in the world when a mid-air emergency occurs. You cannot prevent every change from entering your lives and your organizations, but you can mitigate or eliminate their effects on your company. After these Marines plan and perform, you'd figure, as after a patrol like that, in a situation like that, all they would want to do is get a shower and a beer. But that's not their process. They realize there's a third part to everything they do to create pivot points, and that's processing what they had done. So as this patrol got back to their home base, they didn't take off their gear and get to the showers. No, they stood in a circle, and their leader did something very interesting. The person in charge of all of them, he stood in front of them, and he admitted everything that he had done wrong in that patrol. Vulnerable and open with his people, not blaming them, but just saying, here's what I could do better as a leader next time. And then each one of his Marines did the same thing. They stood up, even the most junior person, and said, I should have kept better dispersion on that patrol. I should have laid down a better sector of fire. Whatever it was that they knew they could have done better, they openly admitted it. Because for them, it wasn't about who was right, it was about what was right. They knew if they were going to pivot better in the future, they couldn't just get better individually, they had to get better as a team. And you can imagine that some of the things those Marines admitted to were things that maybe I hadn't done before, but I wasn't going to do again, because I learned from my buddy what not to do, because we did that as a group, as a unit, as an organization. This wasn't something that Marines did sometimes after a big patrol or after a big operation was over. They did it every time. And you say, Shawn, we don't have time to do that. We're busy fighting a mile a minute, just going as fast as we can. You have to make the time, because that is exactly where change will enter. The minute that anyone encountered something new in this organization that I was studying, it was immediately shared across the organization. It wasn't just kept in that unit. And so if you have a salesman that encounters a very interesting sales call, or you misquote a price accidentally, or a piece of software goes wrong, why would you not share that information, fix it then, and then get the news across your entire company so that it never happens again? Why make anyone suffer when you only have to make a mistake once, when a change only has to have an effect on your organization once? These three things are what high-performing organizations all over the world are doing in one form or another to stay a step ahead of change, to stay a step ahead of their competition. And though you might not get it completely now, the book that the ACPC gave all of you in your welcome bags outlines every bit of this. So if you get a copy of Pivot Point, make sure you go home with that, read it on the airplane, share it with your management team, because I've outlined exactly what we've been talking about in a way that you can apply when you get back to your office. And I know that a lot of you won't be able to make my breakout session at 2 p.m. today, where I'll be digging into this a little deeper in person, so I've put together a video that might serve as a substitute for you and your team when you get back home. In order to get that video and the worksheets, get out your cell phones, and I want you to text the word Shawn to 72,000. When you do that, you'll get this message. It'll say reply yes. And this 45-minute video actually lays out how you as a management team could sit down on any day and build a mission just like these high-performing teams do, building in your lessons learned, assessing risk before you encounter it, performing at a high level by holding your people accountable in a way that you may not be doing currently, and then processing everything that happens so you never make the same mistake twice, staying a step ahead of change, pivoting like a high-performing team should. And once you do that, you click on that link, you'll see this screen, just enter your information, and boom, you'll immediately get a hold of that video. In addition to that, I've also linked you to my TEDx talk. See, TEDx being a global organization, they wanted me to share with them how organizations like the Marine Corps, like Fortune 100 companies, are creating missions that their people can support, believe in, and buy from. And so if you ever have a need to show your people a talk that involves how do you turn a mission into a movement, it'll be in that link. And I know you may not learn on your phone, so I'm also going to send it to your email. If you have an international phone, you're from Canada or you're from outside the United States, find me after this talk or find me at the breakout session and I'll make sure you get it because it may not work with the texting. So to finish us off, I want to take you back to where we began, where I was in the desert of Iraq with 3 hand grenades, 90 rounds of ammunition, and only 15 minutes to live. See, in this situation, you figure people would be pretty freaked out. But as I sat there in that vehicle and we did our final radio checks, it was completely silent. No one was crying. No one was weeping and rending their hair like when the Wi-Fi at a Starbucks goes out today. You know, they were calm. And the Marine next to me, he nudged me and he motioned up to the sky. I looked up across the open roof of that canopied vehicle and I saw that there was the most beautiful sunset any of us had ever seen before. Purples, grays, and blues, and reds. I mean, think of the most beautiful sunset you've ever captured in your life. And we were there to see it. And we could take a moment to appreciate it even in the midst of that stressful environment because we had prepared. We held people accountable for performing in a certain way, making sure that they knew where they were supposed to be and when, and executing on their objectives. And we knew that we'd trained enough. I've been with these Marines and know they could set a line like nobody else. They could hold it for 15 minutes if they needed to. So as you leave here today and you go back to your organizations, think about your sunset moments, the things that might keep you getting out of bed every morning, your families, the people that you get to support at your organization. Those are the things that are really going to fuel you emotionally as you prepare to deal with change. As we were sitting there in that vehicle, completely silent, suddenly a Marine started laughing. I didn't expect to hear it. And then another Marine started laughing with him, and pretty soon the whole vehicle was laughing at the top of their lungs, and they were all looking right at me. And I wondered, what did I do? But no, at that moment, I heard my boss tell me something that never expected to hear again. He said, Shawn, don't worry about it. There are no insurgents headed our way. You have much longer than 15 minutes to live. And I didn't believe him. I said, why'd you get us all in the vehicle and give me all this extra ammunition and grenades? And he said, Shawn, we were watching to see what you would do. It was a joke, a test. They were watching to see if I could manage change as they had taught me how to, or if I was going to let change manage me and my actions and their performance. As you go back to your companies tomorrow or the next day, you won't have to face a group of heavily armed 20-year-olds watching to see what you'll do, thankfully. But you will return to a company watching to see if you've really committed yourself to a pursuit of excellence. if you've really learned what you need to in order to pivot with change, the change that you've been facing every day and the new changes that are going to be waiting for you when you get back. Your families will be wondering if you have more emotional and mental energy for them because you're not constantly dealing with spinning 20 plates, dealing with all these unknown changes, all the changes that take away your ability to be present for them. I want to leave you with one last word, the words those Marines left me with that day. As you go back and you commit yourself to excellence, as you learn how to pivot, I'll be watching to see what you do.